Picture the buyer who saved for 18 months to buy a Seiko. They buy it, but 6 weeks later, they discover what they bought is not what they thought. And that's how thousands of Seiko buyers across 2025 and into 2026 feel. They are the entire reason this video exists, because what's happening to buyers isn't funny. This isn't a hit piece on the brand or a pity part. I love Seiko. I own Seikos. But there are 7 references right now where paying the boutique number would be a small financial crime against yourself. By the end of this list, you'll know exactly which ones. You'll know exactly why, and you'll know what to do about it. Let's start where the damage looks smallest, but actually isn't. Number 7, Seiko 5 Sports SRPD 55. There's a watch nicknamed the 5KX. It sits on the wrist like a baby SKX, runs the caliber 4R36, costs about $295 new, and gets recommended in roughly every first watch thread on Reddit ever written. It is also the watch the secondhand market simply refuses to value at retail. The headline data says the SRPD 55 is actually up 17% on the aftermarket over the past year, which sounds like good news until you understand what's underneath it. The watch is up because pre-owned units now trade between $120 and $190. That's a watch climbing back from a very deep hole, not a watch holding its value. You are not making money. You are watching it cost you less to lose money. The cause is the most Seiko thing the brand does to itself. They built one good case. Then they couldn't stop iterating on the dial. Black, blue, green, burgundy, orange, a safari edition, a racing edition, a retro edition, of the retro edition. Each release pulls the floor down a little more. Each clearance batch from gray market sellers pulls it down a little further. So you have a watch where new units flow out into the world at near $300 and lightly worn units come back the other side at $150. That's not depreciation in the normal sense. That's behavior closer to consumer electronics. A phone, a pair of headphones, something that crosses a depreciation cliff the moment the box opens. Honestly, this one bothers me, because the 5KX is a really good watch. But I keep coming back to the same thought. If you can buy the same piece, less than a year old, for 40% off, why on earth would you walk into the boutique? Picture the college kid in Singapore who saved for it, bought one in 2023, wore it for a semester, listed it on Carousel at $190, 3 watchers in a week, sold to a teenager in another country who already owned 2 of them in different dials. That's the whole life cycle. 6 months, start to finish. The 5KX isn't dying. It's everywhere. Permanent stock in 50 configurations, with no scarcity, no story, no secondhand premium possible. The watch became a commodity. And commodities don't appreciate at retail. They get marked down to where the market actually clears, and the market for an SKX-shaped Seiko in 2026 clears at $150. Here's the part that should make Seiko's marketing team uncomfortable. The 5KX is the watch that introduced the most new buyers to Seiko in the last 5 years. It is, by most measurable accounts, the most popular Seiko product in production. And it is the watch most likely to teach a first-time buyer that walking into the boutique was a mistake. The brand's most successful product is also its most efficient depreciation lesson. Every kid who buys one at retail sells it 3 years later for half, and walks away with the conclusion that Seiko boutique prices are aspirational at best. That kid is also the future Tudor buyer, the future Christopher Ward buyer, the future Grand Seiko buyer. And his first lesson in the watch hobby came courtesy of Seiko's own pricing strategy. If you want one, get one. Just don't pay sticker. Ever. The next one fooled an entire generation of buyers. Briefly, it fooled me too. Number 6. Presage Cocktail Time Blue Moon SRPB 41. Here's the thing about the Cocktail Time. It is possibly the prettiest watch under $500 currently in production. Open a Reddit thread about entry-level dress watches, and the Blue Moon dial gets posted within 4 replies. Sunray blue, 7 layers of lacquer, a box-shaped crystal that catches light in a way most $1,000 watches still can't manage. The retail number is about $475. The secondary market price, right now, is closer to $340. What broke the floor on this watch wasn't a quality problem. It was the brand itself. Seiko ships this dial in a dozen colorways and seasonal limited editions. Gray market giants in Hong Kong and Singapore move them in bulk to clear inventory quotas. Authorized dealers from Tokyo to Munich quietly discount them to keep display shelves moving. By the time a single Blue Moon hits the resale market with full kit, it's competing with 6 other listings of the same reference, all priced to undercut. And then there's the crystal. It's Hardlex, not sapphire. On a $4,500 Grand Seiko, Hardlex makes sense as a cost choice. On a watch that has been quietly tested at the $8 to $100 to $9 to $100 tier through limited editions, it stings. Collectors notice. They mark the watch down in their heads before they even pick it up. Here is the part that doesn't make it into most reviews. The cocktail time runs the caliber 4R35. Accuracy specification of +45 to -35 seconds per day. That's not a misprint. 80 seconds of variance per day listed on the official Seiko spec sheet. A buyer who paid $475 and finds out the watch loses 1 minute and 20 seconds in a single day on the worst end of factory tolerance has a very specific feeling, and it isn't joy. The community knows, the forum threads know, the gray market sellers know, and every Friday, somebody on Watch You Seek posts a pristine Blue Moon with full kit for $349, including shipping. There's a guy on Watch You Seek who posted his Blue Moon in 2023. Pristine. Box, papers, extra strap. Final price, $339. USPS priority. He didn't lose money on his time with the watch. He lost 1.5 years of wearing what is, honestly, a small masterpiece of dial craftsmanship. So he traded experience for cash. The cocktail time turned him into a temporary owner of beauty. There's also a peculiar industry move happening with the cocktail timeline that nobody outside dealer circles talks about. Seiko, quietly authorized, expanded distribution to lifestyle retailers, the kind that sell handbags and sunglasses alongside watches. In 2024, you could find Blue Moon dials in airport duty-free zones in Singapore, Dubai, and Munich, at discounts touching 25% off MSRP. Once a watch starts living in airport cases next to perfume, its prestige breaks permanently. The boutique can charge whatever it wants. The market has already seen the watch on a perfume counter. That's the trade. The watch is wonderful. The boutique price is the problem. Brand number 5 is where the conversation gets uncomfortable for a lot of collectors. Number 5. Prospex King Samurai SRPE 35. The King Samurai upgrades were supposed to be the answer to every samurai complaint that ever existed. Ceramic bezel insert, replacing the aluminum one that scratched if you breathed near it. Sapphire crystal, replacing the Hardlex that pickled under sunlight. A textured grid dial that looks, depending on the light, either premium or like a kitchen tile. $625 at retail. Watch Charts pegs the SRPE 35 down 14.7% over the past 12 months alone. In a year when the broader Seiko index was up nearly 10%, that's not a market problem, that's a model problem. And here's what's really going on. The Samurai chassis is a 43.8mm case with sharp angular flanks and a profile that, on most wrists, looks like it's trying to start a fight. Some people love it. The paneristi curious crowd. The divers who don't dive. The guys who think a watch should announce its presence from across a room. But that crowd is finite. And once you've sold them all, the only people left are the ones who don't want a 44mm slab of brushed steel on their wrist for the next 10 years. There's no path to growth from there, just a slow, quiet release of inventory into the secondhand pool. The movement underneath is the 4R35, the same workhorse you find in Seiko, 5s at 1/3 the price. Nothing wrong with the 4R35. It runs. It keeps time, mostly. But asking somebody to pay $625 for a Samurai when the engine room is identical to a $200 Seiko 5 requires the buyer to really love the geometry. Increasingly, they don't. Here's another detail I haven't seen anyone connect. The King Samurai launched in 2020. At that exact moment, Seiko was also pushing the King Seiko revival. Both lines used the word King to suggest something elevated, something premium. But the King Samurai used a 4R35. The King Seiko used a 6R31. Same family of mid-tier movements, different price brackets, same marketing word. The brand was, in effect, training collectors to associate King with a price premium that wasn't backed by mechanical content. And every time a King Samurai gets returned, traded, or resold for a $400 loss, that lesson gets reinforced. Picture the dive instructor in Roatan who bought one in 2022 for actual diving. Real ocean, real pressure. He still wears it. Loves it, in fact. But last year, his shop ordered 6 new SRPE 35s for the trainees, and 3 of them are still sitting in the case, unsold, 18 months later. Not because the watch is bad, because nobody walking through that shop wants something that big anymore. That dive shop in Roatan is a real-time confidence gauge on the Samurai chassis, and the meter is reading low. The next one is the watch I feel torn about. Stick with me for the detail. Number 4. Prospex Alpinist SPB 121. I want to be careful here, because the SPB 121, the green sunburst alpinist with the gold accents and the internal compass bezel, is one of the most universally loved Seikos in production. Watch charts shows it actually up 7% over the past year. So why is it on a list called watches that dropped in value? Because the longer story is the real story. This watch retails for $725 at authorized dealers, right now, today. Open Chrono 2.4, and you can pull up 24 examples, brand new with full kit, hovering between $580 and $680. The market never accepted the retail number. It set its own number, and it's held that number for 4 years. Over 5 years, the SPB 121 is down 12.3% against a benchmark that, for most of that window, was deeply negative for Seiko broadly. The watch is recovering off a floor it never should have been at, but the floor is the point. If you bought yours at boutique retail in 2021, you ate a $150 haircut on day one, and you've spent 4 years trying to grow back into it. There's a specific kind of collector who shows up in alpinist threads, mid-30s, got into watches through YouTube, saved up for the green dial because everyone on Instagram said it was the one. Walked into an authorized dealer because, in their head, authorized sounded safer than Chrono 2.4. Paid full price. Found out 2 weeks later they could have saved $175 and still gotten an unworn piece with original papers. That collector posts a "Did I overpay?" thread once every 6 weeks somewhere on the internet. The replies are always the same. Yes, you did. Welcome to the modern Seiko market. The Alpinist itself is wonderful. The cathedral hands, the compass bezel that nobody actually uses but everybody secretly loves owning. The way the sunburst flips from olive to bright lime depending on what angle the light hits. It's a cult watch with cult watch qualities. The only failure is the retail strategy that prices it as though it's scarce, when in fact, it's available everywhere at all times. There's something almost philosophical about the SPB 121 situation. Cult watches usually hold their value because supply can't keep up with collector demand, but the SPB 121 has unlimited supply. The cult exists, the scarcity does not, so the cult premium that should exist doesn't. And the boutique price just sits there, aspirational and unmet. This is the cleanest example on the entire list of why retail and reality have decoupled. Don't buy this at the boutique. Don't even walk in. Go straight to the secondary. The Alpinist has already absorbed its drop. You don't need to absorb yours too. Number 3 is where things get a bit more personal. Number 3, Presage Sharp-Edged GMT SPB 221. There's a 42mm Seiko with a black dial textured with the Asanoa pattern, the hemp leaf motif that goes back 1,000 years in Japanese textile design, and underneath it, a caliber 6R64 that delivers GMT functionality, a power reserve indicator, and an independent local hour hand. It's beautifully constructed. The kind of watch you'd pull out of a box for the first time and feel a real quiet hit of, okay, yes. The retail number is $1,400, but the market response, after careful study, is no thank you. This is the watch where the Swiss tax stops being an abstraction and becomes a specific problem. At $1,400, the sharp-edged GMT lands in the same waiting room as the Christopher Ward C63 Sealander GMT, the Mito Ocean Star GMT, and the still available pre-owned Tudor Black Bay GMT entry. 3 watches with 3 completely different stories, all of them carrying a stronger brand signal in 2026 than a presage with a name most Western buyers can't pronounce. So the SPB221 just sits. The risk score on watch charts is 90 out of 100. That's the extreme end of the scale. New units leave authorized dealers slowly. Pre-owned units leak onto the market at $800 to $1,000, depending on the day. A Reddit seller moved a full kit example for $750 in 2024. Another in 2025 went for $850 after sitting for 2 months. Here's what nobody says out loud about this watch. The dial is beautiful. I keep thinking about it, actually. The hemp leaf pattern doesn't photograph well, and that's part of the problem. It's a watch you have to see in person to want, and the people walking past presage cases in jewelry stores in 2026 aren't stopping. They're walking toward the Tudor section. When you can't get the in-person look, you can't generate the desire that justifies $1,400. The other problem nobody flags: the sharp-edged GMT is a caller GMT, not a flyer GMT. Meaning the local hour hand jumps independently when you cross time zones, which is exactly the function a frequent traveler wants. But the marketing materials don't push that distinction the way Swiss brands do. The result is a watch with an actually useful GMT mechanism that the buyer never quite understands, sitting next to Swiss competitors that explain their GMT type in every advertisement. Useful function, buried story, lost sale. Picture the executive in Frankfurt who bought one in 2022 to celebrate a promotion. Took it on 3 business trips. Loved it. Then traded it in last summer for a Tudor Black Bay 58 because, and I quote his post on a German forum, nobody in the lounge ever asked about the Seiko. The Asanoha pattern lost to small talk in business class. That is the real story of the SPB221. I want to sit with this watch for a second longer, because it bothers me. The SPB221 is, on paper, the most technically interesting Presage Seiko makes. The Asanoha dial is a piece of cultural craftsmanship. The 6R64 is a real movement with a real power reserve indicator and real GMT functionality. Everything about it deserves to succeed. And yet, in any given month, you can pull watch charts and find more SPB221s listed for sale than sold. That gap between supply and demand is what kills a reference. Not bad reviews. Not quality problems. Just slow, quiet, accumulating unsold inventory until the market gives up and marks the watch down by a third. Quick check. Which of these do you still own? Drop the reference number below. I read them. The next one is the watch the brand seems most embarrassed about. It just won't say so out loud. Number 2. Prospex 1965. Divers 62 MAS. SPB 143. The SPB 143 was supposed to be a celebration. When it launched in 2020, the watch press fell over itself. 40.5mm case. The cleanest tribute to the original 1964-62 MAS, Seiko's first professional diver that the brand had ever produced. A sunburst gray dial that shifted from charcoal to silver, depending on the angle. The DiaShield-treated case that resisted scratches in a way no Seiko diver before had. $1,250 at launch. 6 years later, you can pick one up, full kit, for around $800 on a good day. Pristine units have moved for as little as $650 in private sales. What happened here is the most Seiko thing the brand does to itself, repeatedly, across every collection it touches. They built a winner, then they couldn't stop iterating on the winner. SPB 147, black dial, same case. SPB 149, limited blue. SPB 151, green. SPB 185, SPB 187, then a second generation. Then a third generation with the caliber 6R55 upgrade. Then special editions for each market. Then a US-only release. Then a Japan-only release. The first owner of the SPB 143 in 2020 watched the watch they bought become the old one inside 18 months. By 2023, it was the original, which in collector language is a polite way of saying the one we've moved past. By 2025, it was a perfectly good diver trading well below its launch price, with no clear catalyst to drag it back up. The thing is, and this is the second-page detail nobody talks about, the SPB 143 was also, mechanically, the simplest of the line. 6R35 movement. 70-hour power reserve. No upgraded escapement, no claim to chronometer accuracy. Just a clean, honest dive watch. Once Seiko started layering the line with improved versions, the original got reclassified in collectors' heads as the entry point, not the celebration. The forensic market reality bothers me. The SPB 143 has, for the most part, completed its depreciation curve. It's plateauing. Watch charts shows it actually up 4.6% over the past year, which is recovery, not decline. So if you're going to own one, and you should, because it's the best-looking modern 62 MAS Seiko makes, you are buying near the bottom, not the boutique. Buy somebody else's nostalgia at half price. Here's a quiet detail that says everything about the SPB 143's market position. On the secondary market, the watch sells fastest in late summer, when collectors are doing inventory rotations before year-end tax planning. The same buyer who bought one new at full retail in March 2020 sells it in August 2025 for $450 less than he paid, and uses the cash toward a Tudor Black Bay 58. The SPB 143 doesn't get retired, it gets traded up. And every trade is another data point, telling the market the watch isn't worth what Seiko thinks it is. There is a guy in Brooklyn who collects all 662 mass generation variants. He found number 7 in his collection, a clean SPB 143, sitting in a pawn shop in Bushwick for $580 in February. He paid full ticket. He says he didn't even haggle. He says the watch was so clean it felt cruel. That's the floor. That's what we mean by completed depreciation curve. And then there's the one Seiko desperately wants you to believe is the future. Before we move on to the next part, let me tell you this. Most people don't realize this, but buying a watch the wrong way can cost you thousands, and you won't even notice it until it's too late. You walk into a store or browse online, and everything looks the same, but behind the scenes, there's a system. Prices aren't always fair, availability is controlled, and one bad decision can leave you overpaying for something that doesn't even hold its value. That's why I created a complete free insider guide to buying watches. Inside, you'll find the best watches to buy, the watches to avoid, and how to choose a watch that actually fits your style and budget long term. The goal is simple. I'll help you stop guessing and start buying smart. You'll find the free guide in the pinned comment and description. Now, let's move on to the next part. Number 1, King Seiko KSK Revival SPB 281. Here's the watch Seiko bet the next decade on, the King Seiko Revival. A 37mm case engineered around the 1965 KSK silhouette, with the sharp Taro Tanaka grammar of design facets, a box sapphire crystal, a sunburst dial that catches light like still water at dusk. 65 years of brand history, repackaged for buyers who want something more than a Seiko 5, but can't or won't spend Grand Seiko money. Approximately $1,700 at retail. Inside that beautiful, sharp-edged case is the caliber 6R31, a movement that beats at 21,600 vibrations per hour. A movement with an accuracy specification of +15 to -25 seconds per day. A movement that shares essentially its entire architecture with the 6R35, found in Seiko 5 sports models at $300. The only difference between the two is the date function. The King Seiko version doesn't have one. So Seiko removed 2 jewels, kept everything else identical, and charged you $1,400 more for the privilege. This is the disconnect that the collector community has refused to swallow. There's a writer at Substack, pseudonym Nuatches, who described the situation as dropping a Toyota Corolla engine into a Porsche 911. That phrase has circulated through King Seiko threads on Watch You Seek for 2 years now, because it captures something that data alone doesn't. The original King Seiko line, in the 1960s, was the internal competitor to Grand Seiko, the brand that pushed Grand Seiko to be better. The 1965 KSK ran a high beat movement at 28,800 vibrations per hour. The 2022 Revival runs a movement that hobbyists associate with sub-$500 watches. So, the secondary market did the only honest thing it could do. It refused to value the dial separately from the movement. Right now, you can find King Seiko KSK Revival examples, full kit, often current production, moving between $800 and $1,000 on the secondary, nearly half off retail. There's a watchmaker in Osaka who works on these regularly. He told a friend of mine, casually, over coffee, and I'm paraphrasing here, but the substance is right, that the movement runs beautifully when it's regulated properly. Sometimes inside +3 to -5 seconds per day, sometimes better than chronometer spec, but Seiko doesn't regulate them to that level out of the factory. They could, they don't. And every collector who eventually figures this out either learns to regulate the movement themselves or sells the watch. There's a Watch You Seek thread from 2022 where a user posts a time grapher reading from his King Seiko at -3 to +5 seconds. He's confused, asks if Seiko secretly upgraded the regulation. Other owners reply with their numbers. Some are running tight, most are running wide, +15 to -25, exactly as published. The lottery is real. The boutique buyer doesn't know they're playing it. The other quiet failure of the KSK revival is the bracelet. The original King Seiko bracelets in the 60s were dramatic, beveled, designed to refract light. The modern bracelet is a hollow link, mid-range piece that you'd find on a sub-$1,000 presage. Hold a vintage KSK bracelet in one hand and a 2022 revival bracelet in the other, and the experience answers every question about pricing you might have had. The dial is the heir. The bracelet is the disappointment. The forensic verdict on the SPB 281 and on the whole KSK revival line is the cleanest one on this list. Beautiful watch, wrong engine, wrong price for the engine. Until Seiko either upgrades the movement or drops the retail number by $400, the secondary market will continue to do the brand's pricing for it. I keep going back and forth on whether to recommend this watch at all. The dial is so good. The case is so good. The proportions are so good. But the movement is the same as a Seiko 5, and the price is the same as a real Grand Seiko entry point, and that gap is where the King Seiko lives. Buy it pre-owned at $900 and you have a brilliant watch. Buy it at retail and you have a story you'll tell yourself for years to feel okay about it. Here is the one thing the data does not show you on a chart. Walk into the Seiko boutique on Madison Avenue any weekday afternoon. Stand near the dive watch case for 10 minutes. Watch the people. 8 out of 10 are tourists. 2 out of 10 are local enthusiasts. Of those 2, 1 is killing time. The other is doing math on his phone. He's checking Chrono 2.4. He's checking watch charts. He's pricing the watch on his wrist against the watch in the case. He nods at the salesperson. He doesn't buy. He walks out. He'll buy the same piece pre-owned next Tuesday for $400 less. The boutique counted his foot traffic. It did not count the sale that walked across the street. The thing about Seiko in 2026 is that the brand is, on its own terms, doing better than it has in years. Grand Seiko has never been more respected. Prospex has never been more polished. The vintage-inspired design language has never been more refined. But the retail strategy is fighting a war the brand has already lost on the supply side. Every time Seiko opens a boutique, every time they raise a price, every time they release a third iteration of a beloved reference, they generate more secondary supply for the next buyer. The next buyer is online. The next buyer has Chrono 2.4 open in another tab. The next buyer can do math. If you want the SPB 143, if you want the Alpinist, if you want the cocktail time, if you want the King Seiko revival, skip the boutique, let somebody else take the first hit. Buy clean, lightly worn, full kit at the floor that the market has already established for you. If you've ever stood at a Seiko display case feeling that small voice say, "Wait, am I about to overpay?" That voice is right. I built a buying guide for exactly that moment. We've got a book you can read in the pinned comments. So, stop guessing. Which of these 7 did you almost buy at retail? Which of them did you buy? Let me know in the comments. Like this video and subscribe.